Hello, it is Friday afternoon at 2:30 p.m. right now recording this. I typically would not record a podcast at 2:30 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, but it has been a big week. And this is the only time that it got done or that it could be done. It's actually been a really big, whole last week and a half. So last week I recorded the audiobook for Grounded Wildness, which was fun and took a lot of time and just a massive amount of energy to be present with every word that was being spoken. So yeah, that was fun. And I'm so excited that you are going to be able to have the audiobook once it's released a little bit later in the fall. That happened last week. That was all of my energy last week. And then this week, I launched a workshop on breaking free from should and reclaiming your freedom. It was only launched to my email list. So if you want in on that and you're not on my email list, send me a message, send me an email, send me a message on LinkedIn, and I will get you the sign up for that. It's just a one-off free workshop that I'm offering mostly because it's a new keynote and I need to practice it. And I wanted people to be able to benefit from it at the same time. So I think you'll get a lot out of it. If you like that whole thought of breaking away from should and reclaiming your freedom, you'll probably like the workshop. So that happened this week. I got the proof of my book this week of Grounded Wildness. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that in this episode. And I changed the name of my email to the Grounded Wildness Weekly, and this podcast has a new name as well. So it is now the Grounded Wildness podcast, just called Grounded Wildness. And part of that is because I wanted to align with the book coming out, but even more so because Grounded Wildness is not just a book, not at all. It's a way of living. It's a movement. Even more so, it is a community. I really want to be a part of the Grounded Wildness community and facilitate that and grow that of all of you coming together, a group of women creating change and breaking the rules with purpose and living in greater joy and freedom. That's really what this is all about. Yes, you as an individual, but also all of us together. So Grounded Wildness is starting with a book, but it's so much more than that. And that's why it's the podcast. There's going to be some more stuff launched later on. There's 2 new keynotes. There is a journal. There's going to be this is just the beginning. This last week of launching new things is just the beginning. And I am thrilled and a little tired. I'm definitely going to take a nap after finishing recording this podcast. So both can be true at the same time, thrilled and tired. So that's all the big things happening. And in the midst of that, I had a total breakdown. And I know I had said, if you are a loyal podcast listener and you've been listening to all the last couple podcasts on where you are performing your life, I was going to do a podcast episode. This one was going to be about breaking free from performing. I will still get to that. But this breakdown that I had last week or earlier this week, it feels really real to me. And whenever something feels that real, it's a sign that probably other people are feeling the same thing. And it's something that I should talk about, that I should bring forward in an email or on this podcast or wherever. And this was definitely too long of a story to just put into an email. So here we are. This is my breakdown. It was related to perfectionism, but really it was so much more than that. So in the episode today, I'm going to talk through what that breakdown was, what was really behind it, and then what I did about it. And I'm sharing this because I think you'll be able to resonate with a lot of this. And actually, almost everything I'm talking about today goes with any kind of breakdown. So mine was like a perfectionism type freak out breakdown. But this goes for any kind of strong reactions you have, because that's what this was. It was a strong reaction, and everything I'm talking about today will apply to any type of strong reaction that you are having. So breakdown, getting into it right now. So this is what happened. All right. So this is about the book, about Grounded Wildness. So backstory on this, the editing process for a book, or at least what my book has gone through, is, I write it, I do all the drafts, on my own. Then I have beta readers read it, and then it goes to a copy editor. So copy editor is the person who fixes all my grammar and sentence structure. So that's like the first round of editing. And then it goes through multiple proofreaders where I am also proofreading along at the same time. So these are professional proofreaders. I think there were 3 rounds of professional proofreading. Plus, I look at it during at least 2 of those rounds to make sure that I'm not seeing any additional errors or things that need to be changed. So this is the background of that story. It had gone through all of that. And even within that, there's almost always an error that you don't catch. You'll be reading like a best-selling book and you'll see a typo in there. I know this. I know this to be true. Logically, my brain knows that errors do exist. But here's what happened. 2 weeks ago, the book was sent to the printer. So all the editing happens, then the book gets sent to the printer, and then I get a proof in the mail. So there's like a 2-week time period here where the printer's putting the book together. Then I get a proof in the mail, and this is like the last stop. If I see a change that needs to be made, I can send it back to the printer and say, on page 81, we need to change this. But the problem at this stage is that it delays the timeline by another 2 weeks to release the book. So like you have a decision to make, and there's a cost involved too. So you have a decision to make. Like, are you going to wait another 2 weeks to release the book, or are you going to fix the error? That was the situation at hand. So right after the book went to the printer, but before I got the proof, I noticed one little error. It was a formatting error. It didn't really bother me, but I noticed it and I was like, okay, next time around when we print it and for the ebook, let's fix that. No big deal. Then last Thursday, I believe, I was reading the audiobook, recording the audiobook with the producer who was there remotely, and he noticed a typo. He noticed that one of the words in the book was spelled incorrectly. And it bothered me so much. Like I was so frustrated by this typo. It was in a word that was capitalized, but within a paragraph. It wasn't a header. It wasn't like a major formatting thing. It was a misspelled word. It's totally a typo. And the deepness of my frustration, like it was strong and it was there. And I was in the middle of recording the audiobook. So couldn't really like dive into it. And the really funny part is I was reading the chapter in Grounded Wildness called Feel Your Feelings. And I was like, okay, well, Heather, you can't feel this feeling right now. Like you can't let frustration come out in your tone of voice and reading the audiobook. Like that's going to be terrible. So I shook it off. I took some deep breaths. I'm not concerned at all about the quality of the audiobook. I feel like I got back into reading it and presence just fine. But that frustration was still there. And one of the things I actually talk about in the book under Feeling Your Feelings is if you can't feel them in the moment, come back to them later because they are still going to be there. And this frustration was still there. So later on that afternoon, after finishing the audiobook recording for the day, I had a call with my friend who we coach each other. So we're friends, but we're both trained coaches. So we have calls set up to just coach each other. That's what we do. And she was coaching me. This would all already been planned ahead of time. And I got on the phone with her and had what can really only be called like a breakdown. Like there were tears, there was frustration, there was so much emotion going on. And it was really helpful to talk to her. And also later on that night, I went to a full moon circle. Can talk about that another time. I went to a full moon circle with a friend of mine and we drove together. So on the way back, this frustration came up and there wasn't this like sobbing tears that there were on the coaching call, but there was still some misty eyed and a tear might've slipped down my face. So even talking through it twice, that frustration was still there. And at first I really did think that this was about the typo. Like I thought this was like the frustration was about the typo, but that was like only the surface level thing. And I've also learned that whenever I have a strong reaction to something, usually there's something else going on rather than just the surface reason that appears to be the obvious thing. Like that thing is the trigger, that thing is real, but there's usually a thing beneath the thing. And there definitely was for me in this situation. And I didn't know it in the moment. And I needed to slow down, talk with the coach, talk with my friend, and do some self exploration to figure out what was really behind this breakdown. And like I said at the beginning, this goes for any kind of strong reaction. Like whenever I have a strong reaction, then I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? That's a sign to slow down and be like, what is going on here? Because that seems to be having something more to do with just the situation at hand. And so it was interesting when I stopped and when I dug in and when I talked to people and when I listened and explored myself, like so many different reasons came up about why I was having this really strong perfectionism type of reaction, way stronger than I would typically have. Like typically historically, I've been a perfectionist when it comes to the big things. Like I always put a lot of pressure on myself to be successful right away and to just do well. But I wasn't typically a super detail oriented perfectionist. Like an error or a typo doesn't typically bother me. But this was different. And it was different for so many reasons. So one, this is a huge project. Like project doesn't even feel like the right word. Like this book I've been actively writing it for almost 2 years. And then I was taking notes for this book minimally. I didn't even know what it was, but I was taking notes for this book before my last book, my first book ever came out. I had titled this Evernote. I had this Evernote note that was called Let Your Spirit Loose. And then I just started writing. And whenever something came up, I would put it in there. And those notes were real slow at first, but then they got faster. So like I knew something was there. So this has been percolating in my head for a long time. And then I actively started outlining it and writing it almost 2 years ago at this point. So it's just big. Like it's a big project. And whenever anything is big, the reaction's going to be bigger. Like if something takes you 2 years to do, your reaction is going to be a lot bigger than something that took you 2 days to do, or 2 hours, or 2 minutes. And that just makes sense. And when something is bigger and the stakes are higher and you've put more energy into it, there's also just going to be like that bigger chance of those old rules coming back. The stress level is higher. The reactions are closer to the surface. Everything just feels bigger because it is bigger. The project itself is bigger. And so it makes sense. It makes sense that I would be having this strong reaction to something that I have put this much of my life into. So that was the first realization. Then I also realized that like I was actually judging this error. And because I was judging it, I was afraid that other people would as well. So I was afraid people would think the book was sloppy or that it was somehow indicate like this one error would indicate a lower quality of the book as a whole. Like I got kind of judgy about it. And then because I got judgy, I was afraid other people would be judgy, which happens all the time. It happens all the time that like our own emotions are actually a mirror. They're a mirror for, or like what my fear was that other people were doing was actually a mirror for what I was feeling and thinking and what was happening below the surface. So my own judgment, the fear of other people's judgment was actually a reflection of my own judgment. So that's always an interesting thing too, when your own reactions are actually a mirror to what you're feeling, or your reactions to other people are actually a mirror to what you are thinking and feeling and afraid of and what's going on inside you. Yeah, there's a lot there, and it's always pretty interesting and sometimes pretty humbling to do a deep dive into that area. Then there was this really concrete piece of like, the book is on a tight timeline. I don't want to delay it by 2 weeks. And because of that, like, because if we delay it anymore, it's like getting into the holiday season, and that's just not a great time to release the book. Plus, I want you to have this book. I've been talking about it for a long time, and I'm just like, I want it to be out in the world. But being on that tight line made it feel like I didn't have a choice. When I absolutely could have said, I want to delay the book 2 more weeks and I want to fix this error. I fully had that choice. but it kind of didn't feel like a choice. And whenever we feel like choice and freedom and autonomy are taken away, the reaction's stronger because we are adults and people and humans who like to be autonomous and like to have freedom and like to have choice. So whenever it feels like there isn't that choice there, we're losing control in some way, the reaction is going to be stronger. So we're already up to 3 layers here, 3 layers. And actually the biggest ones have yet to come. So here we go. It was a big project. I was judging the error. And then it was also on a tight timeline, which was outside of my control. Here's probably the biggest one that my friend coach, pointed out to me, which is that grounded wildness is super vulnerable. There are a lot of things in there that I've only talked about with close friends and with my therapist. And, I feel like I've totally processed them. I don't feel like I feel like I'm ready to let that all out into the world. I feel really good about that. I don't feel like I rushed it, nothing like that. And it's still really real. And I want it to be real. And that vulnerability, it ups the ante. And so my perfectionism reaction here was trying to protect me in some ways. Like it was trying to protect me from that vulnerability. Like if I could just make everything perfect, then somehow the vulnerability of the content itself would be less. And that doesn't even totally logically make sense, but it was like it was a way of control. Like it was trying to control the things I could control, because even though I am 100% choosing and wanting to put this out into the world, I can't control what you're going to do with it. I can't control criticism I might get. I can't control if people don't understand it. And that's a lot when you're sharing something that is so real and true to my own personal experience. And I don't feel like I'm actively concerned about criticism. I know not everyone will like it. And at the same time, it's probably there a little bit on a deeper level. And trying to make everything perfect was like protecting me from the vulnerability of sharing these really personal things that I'm sharing because I think you're going to connect with them. And because also, like, what's the point of sharing if I'm not going to be real? Like, what's the point of even writing a book if I'm not going to be real and truthful? And because when other people share their truth, that's when I get to see my own truth. And I want that. I want to be part of that. So I have all of these really good reasons, and they're real clear and they're real deep and they are strong, and the vulnerability is still there. So this perfectionism, this reaction was perfectionism or protection. It was like perfectionism protection from that vulnerability. And then the final one, which is pretty funny, I think. I thought about it and I was like, when was the last time I knowingly put something out into the world that had errors? Like knowingly was like, oh, I can see that this has an error in it, and I'm going to just hit print. I'm going to hit send on the email. I'm going to present that PowerPoint knowing it has an error in it. And the last time I could remember was 6th grade. 6th grade. So we are talking about what? I don't know, a million years ago, a long, long, long time ago at this point, 30 plus years ago, that I was in 6th grade. And the situation then, and it's funny that I still remember it, is I was running for student council co-chair. And this is like student council president, but there were just 2 of us, student council co-chair, 6th grade. And you were only allowed to put 2 essentially campaign posters up around school because they didn't want the whole school littered with posters. So every person who was running for a position in student council could put 2 posters up. And I did this really intricate poster where I was like cutting things out of the poster board. I mean, it took forever to make this thing. And when I finished it, I realized that I had spelled the word chair wrong. I like flipped around the A and the I, so it looked like chire. And what's really funny too is that I was the spelling bee champion. So like I clearly knew how to spell chair, and just it was my own version of a typo. And it took me so long to make that poster that I decided to put it up anyway. And I got to tell you, I won. I got student council co-chair. So clearly the error in that poster did not make any difference in the actual results of the student council election. But that was the last time that I could remember putting something out there knowingly that it had an error. And I catch errors all the time. Like, this is not about everything else being perfect. I catch errors frequently. Like, I just caught an error on my website that had been there for almost 3 years. And I was like, oh, well, there we go. Now we're going to change that typo. No one else had caught it. I hadn't caught it. I didn't feel badly about it at all. I just changed it and moved on. And even this error in the book, if I had caught it after it went to the printer, like I didn't see it until I had the book actually in my hands, I would have been annoyed, but I would not have had this strong of a reaction. It was knowingly that I would knowingly put something out into the world that had an error in it. And this is a growth edge for me. Holy cow. I didn't even realize what a growth edge this was for me. And I would be curious, like, just pause and ask yourself, like, when was the last time you knowingly put something out into the world that had errors in it? Something of any sort of significance at all that knowingly had errors. I'd be curious to hear if anyone wants to message me and tell me what their response is. I would be very curious to hear what yours is too. So yeah, those reasons all together, like, this is why I was reacting so strongly. And I'm thinking some of those will probably resonate with you too, or you can take back and say, oh yeah, when I am having this super strong reaction, like, what's actually going on? What are the things beneath the things? Anytime that you have a reaction that you're like, wow, this reaction is strong. This reaction feels like out of whack or out of proportion to the situation at hand. And if it has to do with perfectionism, just know that, like, perfectionism is a self-protection mechanism. It's protecting you from criticism. It's protecting you from vulnerability. It is, like, on a deeper level, there can be some shame involved in perfectionism. Like, I'm going to try and make everything perfect to prove that I am worthy, which, as we know, is nothing that can ever be proven because you just are worthy. It's one of the tenets of grounded wildness, that you are already complete, worthy, enough, and whole just as you are. No proving, pleasing, perfecting, or rebelling needed. But that perfectionism is protecting you from all of that. So if you're having any of those reactions, like, pause and dig a little deeper. Dig a little deeper and see what's going on. And so in the moment, I told you on that Thursday is when I found out about it. I talked to friends. I, talked to my coach. I had the breakdown. I let it cry. I let myself cry. And the crying is always helpful. Talking is always helpful. But there was a few other things I did to let go of the situation. So one, the exploration and realization about the whole 6th grade co-chair poster thing was really helpful. Like, this really is a growth edge for me and something I need to lean into. So that was a really interesting realization. Then also on that Friday, so the day after this realization, I finished recording the audiobook, and then I basically put my life back together. So I dyed my hair, which it really needed. I cleaned my house. I pulled this giant mint plant out of my garden that has looked annoying and terrible for like 3 months, and I just hacked it off and pulled it out. I had holes in my wall from a shelf that I had taken out after I moved in April, and the holes were still there. And I got some spackled those holes up. And I did all of those things on Friday, and somehow putting all of those external things back together helped to put me back together on the inside as well. So that was massively helpful. I can't even tell you how helpful that was. Like, as soon as all those things were done, I was like, oh, now I'm good. Now I'm good. Both my friends that I talked to on Thursday also told me that they're both avid readers, and they told me that they catch errors in books all the time. I'm not generally a super detail-oriented person, so I don't catch that many errors. Although Saturday night, I was reading a book best-selling, like New York Times best-selling fiction book, and I caught an error in it. And the combination of those together made me feel a lot better about the whole thing. And then I texted another friend about it who is a coach, and she said something really funny. She was like, this is just like furiously in line with your work. And I was like, yeah, furiously and infuriatingly in line with my work. It's like the work is teaching me the lesson again and again and again. And I needed that. I needed to hear that. And I needed to learn that lesson in a bigger way. Like I thought this lesson had been learned and it just needed a bigger stage and a bigger situation. And I needed to learn it again at another level. And I need to remind myself too, finally, I reminded myself that this one little error makes no difference in the message of the book. No difference at all. Errors are normal. We are human. Errors happen. And the messages of the book, if anything, align to finding an error in it, but really don't take away from it at all. They don't take away from the message of the book at all. The goal of Grounded Wildness, whether it's the book or anything else related to Grounded Wildness, the goal of living your life in Grounded Wildness is not perfection. It's to be real. And I have no doubt that the book is meeting that goal of being real. No doubt. No fear there. If anything, the only fear is that it's a lot real and the vulnerability that goes along with it. So this error made no difference in reality, just like most of the errors that you make, most of the places that you want something to be perfect don't matter at all either. Every once in a while, there's something that does, but most of the time, it really doesn't. It doesn't take away from the experience, from the message, from the goal, the thing that you're really trying to create or accomplish or do or say or present or any of those things. Like, it's okay. It's okay to have an error. It doesn't detract. So I did a lot of things. I did a lot of things to help manage through this breakdown and then actually come out of it. And I wanted to list all those things off for you and point out that there were a lot of them because I needed all of them. And I know that sometimes like I can get judgmental about myself, and I have no doubt that you can too, about feeling like, why am I reacting so strongly to this? Or like, I should just be able to get over it. I should be able to just get through it. Like, why am I even feeling this way in the first place? Or I should just be able to go for a 10-minute walk and let it all go, or meditate for a few minutes and just let it all go. And sometimes those work. Sometimes all you need is 10 minutes. And sometimes you need to do 8 different things to remind yourself and to center back into yourself and to manage through a big reaction and strong emotions and then come out the other side of it. So it's okay. It's okay to take what you need and to do what you need for yourself. And going along with that is always the piece around self-compassion, getting curious about what you're experiencing and not judging yourself for the reaction, for the experience of it, for what's going on for you. Instead, treat yourself with compassion. If you want to learn more about that, go back to episode 28. When I talked about, the ways you're performing in your life, the end of the perfectionism episode there, we talk about how to practice self-compassion. So go back and listen to that if that's a place where you feel like that would be helpful to you. So that was my perfectionism breakdown. And the final thing that really helped, I was really through it already, and then this just like solidified it, was I got the proof to the book. I got to hold it in my hands just 2 days ago, and it looked like a real book for the first time. And yes, the error is in there. I can see it. Some of you will probably catch it as well. Many of you probably will not notice it because your brain will just skip right over it, but it's there. And I was able to look at it in the context of this entire book. One word out of 50,000 and how many ever thousands of more letters. It's one letter. And in looking at this whole book, I could really know and see and believe it makes no difference at all. It makes no difference because grounded wildness is grounded wildness. It is the messages of the book. It's everything that you are going to take away from it. It's everything that you're going to take into your life. It's the freedom that you're going to feel on the other side of breaking down those rules and coming into your grounded wildness. And the book was beautiful. Like, I loved the way it looked. I loved holding it in my hands, and I can't wait for you to hold it in your hands as well. So that all coming together, I do feel like the breakdown is really gone. It's gone. It's done. I'm sure there'll be another one at another point, but this one is through. And that was the last step. Okaying that book proof was the last step before printing 2,000 copies of the book. And so I should have a release date for you. I know I've been saying that forever. There have been a couple delays, but it's happening this fall. It's happening soon. And I should have a release date for you at the next podcast episode, hopefully, unless something weird happens. And it's coming soon. And if you want to get in on the pre-sale, it's heatherwhelpley.com/grounded wildness. And then you'll have it first. Like, I will send it out to everyone who's on the pre-sale list, even if it comes in. Like, my last book came in before they told me it was going to come in. So if that ends up being the case this time around again as well, then I'm going to pack up those books and send them to everyone who got one on pre-sale first. So if you want to be in on that, heatherwhelpley.com/grounded wildness. And it's all coming soon. It's exciting. It's big. And sometimes big things cause breakdowns, and that's okay too. So investigate, dig deeper, see what is the thing beneath the thing, and treat yourself with some compassion and care along the way. Bye.